Welcome back to Wrestling Roundtable Radio, here on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable and Go Fight Live. The number to call is 347-857-4647, here on Tuesdays on Blog Talk Radio at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 4 in the morning British Time. Simulcast on all these sites now, and you can get the embedding code to put it on your blog or website off Blog Talk Radio. But in addition, we're also on Go Fight Live, and I'd like to mention, incidentally, that seems as Go Fight Live has expanded their variety of programming from not just boxing and mixed martial arts, but to include pro wrestling as well. We were there first, I'd like to mention. I mean, there's other talk shows going on there now, other internet radio shows, but I'd like to think they got it right the first time. We were there first. And if you want to share your thoughts and opinions, again, the number is 347-857-4647. We were there with Go Fight Live before it evolved. But at least we don't have to share any space anymore with, I guess, the once-acclaimed Dragon Gate. Once acclaimed. But before I introduce the panel, I'd like to also mention that the Wrestling Road Diaries is finally available. That's right, the documentary that followed the former U.S. champion Daniel Bryan in his independent days of Bryan Danielson, along with the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion Colt Cabana. Congratulations, Colt, on picking up that prize, along with Sal Rinauro tagging along, and you're going to see lots of cameos from lots of other indie wrestlers you will recognize if you follow indie wrestling, as they document what it's like being on the road, being an independent professional wrestler. And it just so happened to coincidentally end up being that this week, 2 weeks, or however long period of time that they decided to film this, it ended up being Bryan Danielson's final countdown tour, not just in Ring of Honor, of course, primarily, but also Chikara, AIW, and more. So check out the Wrestling Road Diaries at coltmerch.com and WrestlingRoadDiaries.com, of course. Directed and produced and edited by yours truly. And thanks to all the wrestlers so far and fans who are not only excited but giving it good compliments. So hopefully it does pretty well, and I'm sure it will. But speaking of Will, we've got two on the panel tonight. Will Brooks and Will Vafita is introducing first Will Brooks, who is in our chat room at WrestlingRoundtable.com every Monday night during Raw. Hello, Will.
Hey, Eric. Get this. I've been working out so much lately that my biceps expanded so much they started to bleed today. It's pretty cool.
Bleeding biceps.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Will Vafidez, do your biceps bleed?
Yeah, my biceps absolutely bleed, and thanks for going over your amazing biceps, Will Brooks. But what's more important is TLDWrestling.com, which is even more important than his biceps.
How'd I know that TLD plug was coming? Speaking of TLD, I was in Boston the other week, Will Vafidez, and we passed by the TD Bank Arena where the Royal Rumble was, and you did our blog with live coverage from the building, and I'm just shocked that you resisted the urge to call it the TLD Bank Arena.
Ooh. Well, I don't want to get any lawsuits or anything like that, so I avoided any possible problems with TD Bank since they have all my cash.
Coriander Ake from Chicago, our resident, speaking of all these independents fan. Corey, hello.
Hello, Eric. Hello, guys.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Corey, and I'd like to welcome back yet another name who has been absent far too long from this panel. Chris Harris. Hello, Chris.
Hey, yo. My
Glad to
biceps are bleeding too, but that might be because I'm a cutter.
Thanks for the color tonight, man. It's cool.
Welcome back to the panel, Chris, but I'd like to welcome yet another face. This one not an old face, this one a new face. Some of you have seen her modeling the Wrestling Roundtable T-shirt on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Quite a hit. I want to welcome Teresa Alvarez. I'm getting a really bad echo in my ear. I don't know if it's your cell phone or something, but as I was saying, you just made your pro wrestling debut in Warren, Michigan at XSU Sunday Night Shock.
I actually did not have a match. I went out, I did an in-ring promo. It went well. From just my walk, just my entrance to the ring, people already automatically knew I was a heel, and they booed me, they hated me, and so I came off as a pretty good heel. So I had a couple of GOT fans who were cheering me on, but yeah, I was pretty hated. It was
Well,
fun. It was a rush to be in the ring.
Well, congratulations, and I want to know all about your first match when it finally does happen. But that's not the only thing you've been up to. You just had a role on Detroit 187 on ABC.
It's episode 17. We just had our season finale on Tuesday, but a couple of weeks ago they aired episode 17, and I played a waitress. You can see me for like 3 seconds. But that was
it a fun experience, though?
It was. Like, I love doing this stuff. It's so tiring, but in the end, like, you meet all these great people. You see the final production, and you feel so good after it's all done. I enjoy it.
Well, it's been a real busy March for you, hasn't it?
Yes.
And we're not done, because just this past weekend, you won the 2011 Miss Great Lakes contest, and thanks for bringing the Roundtable into the winners category for a beauty contest for a change.
Oh, screw you, man. Not cool, Eric. Not cool at all.
Sorry, Will, I couldn't resist.
That lasted for 2 days. I was coming back from Ohio, from performing. I was dancing in Ohio. So on Saturday morning, my pageant had started.
Now, do you mean dancing in the stripper sense or some other sense?
No, like actually dancing, like ballet, like jazz, that kind of.
Do you get pissed off when people misinterpret that?
I do. I never thought that people called strippers dancers. I thought they were just called strippers or exotic dancers. There's always a difference between a dancer and an exotic dancer. So the pageant, it went completely fine. The first night I was getting stressed out because I didn't think I did my best. You know, you always beat yourself up. But in the end, I came out on top. I won. I haven't stopped smiling since Sunday, so it's a good thing.
Thanks once again for modeling our T-shirt over at WrestlingRoundtable.com. And where can people find out where you'll be wrestling?
It's accesswrestling.webs.com, and we'll have all the information on there. You guys can find Alana Rose on Facebook, and you can actually go to our YouTube. It's YouTube/XSUWrestling. See all of our shows, all the great matches, all the great people.
And you can get all those on your bio over at WrestlingRoundtable.com. So thanks, Teresa, and hope to hear back from you.
Thanks, hon.
Thanks, Teresa, and holy fucking shit am I glad that echo's gone. So anyway, let's move on to some of the latest goings-on in mixed martial arts and pro wrestling, shall we? As I've done many times, I said, we're finally going to get to that best and worst MMA debuts and returns segment, but guess what? I'm bumping it again. Sorry, little did I know that Zuffa was about to buy Strikeforce. Holy shit. This apparently had been in some people's ears for a little bit, but not mine. This was out of the blue for me, and it's also interesting that we're about to shoot some new episodes of the Roundtable on Sunday, which pertain to the WWF's Invasion angle from 2001, where they had WCW and ECW invade, quote-unquote, their TV shows, but that all came about because in March 2001, WWF bought WCW. Admittedly, it was a far-off second at that point, but their second-place contender in the world of pro wrestling, WCW, well, Zuffa just did that with Strikeforce. We haven't heard the exact number just yet, but you can bet it was probably within the $50 million range if we're to believe what Pro Elite was wagering for it, which was about, I think, combined $40 million or so. Anyway, Zuffa buying Strikeforce. Wow. This is really big news, and I guess I'm just going to give you guys the floor first after I give you some of the details just to give everyone an idea of how big this is. It was the day after the big earthquake in Japan that the news broke. They didn't officially announce this until the Monday after, which was the 14th of March. But Zuffa bought Strikeforce from Silicon Valley Sports and Entertainment, and Dana White was emphatic, saying repeatedly this was business as usual. They're going to keep all the staff, CEO Scott Coker staying on, all the fighters' contracts are still valid, and they're going to fulfill all their business contracts with other promotions, networks, and arenas. Although the only real change is the fights are now taking place under unified rules, which Strikeforce wasn't holding their fights under, so now elbows would be allowed on the ground. But production of the shows will remain in the hands of Showtime for the duration of their contract through 2014. And that's pretty much it. They said the idea of super fights isn't going to happen. They're going to keep them separate, although we all know that Dana White's theory on boxing being diluted because of too many titles is something he's got to be keeping in mind. So there's a possibility of title unification fights. But they also said that they will, quote, give the fans the fights they want. So I don't know how long that's going to last as far as keeping the fighters separate. I mean, really, could they resist putting some of these fights together if they can? So let's see what you guys think. Will Brooks, does this change the landscape of mixed martial arts? Does it make a monopoly?
Yes, but not in a bad way, though. It's not like when WF took in WCW and ECW where they had no competition, which is bad because they have the right to stuff. UFC lives on and who dies with who wins and who doesn't win. So it's not as big a deal. This kind of sucks that Dana White is now the king, the king of mixed martial arts. A little bit, but he knows what he's doing, and he's done a great job so far, so I'll put my faith in him.
See, that's the thing. A lot of people are saying this is bad. First of all, I don't think the term monopoly is quite right because I think it's also exaggerating to say that there's tons of MMA promotions out there because even though they're all lower level minor league, so to speak. Of course, Bellator is doing well, but they're pretty much the only ones left, at least in America. Strikeforce may have been number 2, but it wasn't quite near the number 1 that UFC was. However, what's the thing that we've always been complaining about, Chris? That they're the TNA of MMA in the sense that they make all these stupid decisions. So
exactly.
I think that UFC is at least a little more competent in terms of business and putting things together. So do you think that negates any sort of negatives there might be?
The only negatives I see is for the fighters themselves because they don't have really a bargaining chip now to go against Dana White with. That's really the biggest problem with this. But I'm sure there'll be another competition that springs up in 6 months, like when Elite went down and Strikeforce popped up.
Mm-hmm. Well, Vafidez, do you think that this is going to remain separate? Can they resist doing some of these super fights? Or is it pretty much just going to suffer the same fate as WEC did, and actually Pride did? Pride, of course, a lot faster, in the sense that they're just going to eventually merge them anyway. Is the contract between Showtime and other sort of deals holding them up from doing that?
I'm sure the Showtime contract is definitely holding up that whole merger. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, Strikeforce is rising, unlike where ECW and WCW were kind of falling, and not really any networks wanted anything to do with it. I think MMA is so strong now that networks are going to throw themselves to say, well, okay, Zuffa owns Strikeforce, so Zuffa owns WEC, Zuffa owns UFC. They have so many networks they can probably distribute Strikeforce on that I think there's a positive in this, and that, again, like you said, you're taking a TNA-style company, and now you have UFC taking control of Strikeforce. I think they're going to build it as a minor league to help rise some UFC fighters. I'm sure we'll see some kind of merging with some fights, but I think they're going to try to keep it separate. At least I think they should, because then we're getting too many fighters, and then I'm going to get too confused. You don't want to have 200 MMA fighters in one company. That won't work.
Well,
so
actually, that's the opposite of what Dana White's been saying, because he said a big part of this is we need more fighters. His vision down the line is to be running multiple shows a day in different parts of the world, and they need a lot of fighters for that. So that's actually what he said was part of his strategy or their strategy, I should say, in buying Strikeforce is to get more people.
Well, I'm wondering if they'll do a thing where kind of like a house show in a way, they'll kind of maybe have like fights with Strikeforce to travel around the country, get the UFC brand out there, and get the Strikeforce brand out there, maybe to promote it a little bit more. So maybe we won't see more. Maybe we'll see some non-televised fights. That would be kind of interesting because the prices for these shows are really expensive. And you guys know you went to UFC, and a high ticket on the top of the stands is like $80. Like for me,
we paid more than that.
Okay, well that's my point is that even for me, and I like watching the fights. It's just so much money right now. It's like not even worth it until that money goes down in price. I don't see myself going to a MMA show until I start seeing something that's worth it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think maybe Strikeforce could be holding that audience, might get that audience hooked into it.
Well, Phantom in our chat room just said it doesn't create a monopoly because the majority of MMA fans watch UFC anyway. That's kind of true in the sense that much like how to the non-fan wrestling is WWE or WWF back in the day, to the uninitiated, it's Ultimate Fighting, it's UFC. They don't necessarily know what MMA, the sport, is. And, of course, Dana White wants it to be considered in the same league as other leagues like NFL, NBA, et cetera, UFC. However, I think an ulterior motive also, and this hasn't been talked about nearly as much as the WWE network. See, when WWE bought, or actually at the time WWF bought WCW, I think it really implanted in their mind this idea of acquiring libraries. And, of course, we've seen how many they've acquired. They practically own wrestling history now, and they want to incorporate this further from their 24/7 and online archive into a whole WWE network. Because, of course, they do more than just wrestling. They make movies and other... Oh, I said the W word. I meant sports entertainment. They make movies and all this other sort of stuff. Well, UFC probably has it in mind, as we've gotten some hint at, that they want to have their own UFC network. We've seen UFC On Demand. We see them utilizing the Pride Library and the Best of Pride series. And, of course, between IFL, WEC, now Strikeforce, and everything else that they've bought, seems like it might be headed in that direction. However, a lot of people think that it's not going to feature many women's fights because we all know Dana White has said that he's not all for women's MMA. We just talked about that last time, Will. And even though we just recently went to the Strikeforce show where they did a really good number as far as a draw goes and a gate, and they were supposed to have done pretty well. It's not like they're in the red, Strikeforce was, at least you wouldn't think. A lot of people were saying that it shows a lack of confidence on Scott Coker's end to be selling Strikeforce right after the first round of this heavyweight tournament that we saw. He must not believe in the tournament or the company then if he just sold it before it even got off the ground practically. So back to women's MMA, Will Brooks, do you think that, as many people have been saying, this doesn't bode well for women's MMA? Is it doomed? Or, because it's, quote, business as usual, is that okay? Is Strikeforce going to keep emphasizing that as the counterpoint to UFC?
I think women's MMA is going to be fine. I mean, you got to think, again, this contract is up in, 2014, you said? They still have another 3 years to prove that women's MMA can make money and be successful. And I think they can. Everybody MMA fan knows who Cyborg is because she's a beast. And every non-MMA fan knows who Gina is because she's hot and she's all over the place and she's a good fighter. So they can still they got to be able to prove they can make money, and I think they can. So, and I think Dana White's not stupid. He'll see it, and he'll probably by the time contract's out in 2014, I think he'll say, okay, let's get a women's division going. He's not stupid. He'll see the money on the wall.
Yeah, I agree. You still have plenty of time to build this division up, but we're at the point right now where it basically is Cyborg and Gina, which is where the point UFC was a few years ago. It was like Shamrock and Ortiz. There was only a few guys people knew. So we have plenty of time to build this up. It's really going to be who they sign in the next 3 years and who can fight.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little time for that to be sold. You have to be sold on the fact that these women can fight. I have personally never watched an MMA women's fight. I'm kind of curious, but then again, what we've seen in women's wrestling, I'm not going to see the same thing in MMA. I haven't really watched. But I have
completely
seen some,
fucking different.
Yeah, I know, but I have seen some women's boxing matches, and they actually are more entertaining than the men's one sometimes because they will go at it. I'm definitely curious. I think they'll do it at some point. It'll be a big sell, I can tell you that now, for a UFC, to have a first-ever women's fight.
Getting back to the monopoly point, one last thing I'd like to point out about this whole Zuffa buying Strikeforce thing and people saying that it's creating a monopoly. Well, it just happens to coincide, like I said, with the earthquake that happened the day before, and I think that actually has some relevance to the worldwide landscape here because even before the record-setting 9.0 earthquake, people are already saying that Japanese MMA was on its deathbed because FEG, which owns Dream, and K1, they've got nothing lined up. Everyone's talking about the financial peril they're in, and then just recently, World Victory Road, which owns Sengoku, lost their biggest sponsor. Of course, not all of Japan was affected with the earthquake, but when so much of your country is under rubble, and I don't know if you guys have seen the footage of Japan, but it's just fucking incredible, and I don't mean that in a good way. It's just amazing. Tsunamis and all these towns washed over and people dying, and it's just a terrible disaster, and it's really horrible to see. I'm sure all of you have seen the clips on the news and everything, but not that it's the most important thing right now, but that's exactly, I guess, kind of the point. Pro wrestling shows aren't doing that well either, but they're certainly not thinking of going to MMA shows either, and with all these big promotions in MMA not doing too well in the first place before this even happened, let's also consider that Dana White has said that they're going to be going back to Japan this year for the first time in forever. So maybe this actually just kind of relates to maybe a more worldwide monopoly in a sense, because Zuffa is, of course, focused on expanding worldwide. They want to go to all these different countries, the Netherlands and Sweden and China, Korea, Japan, etc. So do you think that this is going to lead to, indirectly, Chris, a more worldwide lock from the Zuffa octopus?
Oh, yeah, they've been going after the international market lately, and I think this now more than ever is going to put it over the top for them.
UFC 128, Shogun versus Jones from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Someone went over the top, and that's Jon Jones, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's start off with the heavyweight bout between Brendan Schaub and Crow Cop. Crow Cop getting knocked out in the third round. Now, if you saw the countdown show, Crow Cop said, "Oh, he's just a rookie." And I thought, oh, that's such a bad attitude to be taking, Crow Cop. Brendan Schaub said, well, look what I did to Gabriel Gonzaga, and sure enough, he did the same to Crow Cop, but oh man. It looked like going into that third round, Will Brooks, that Crow Cop might have had a chance, if for nothing else than for that point taken away in the second round. Brendan Schaub, of course, winning the first round. Crow Cop, I think, may have evened it up with that point taken away. And going into the third round, I think that made him have a chance. He seemed just a little competitive because Schaub's strategy was obviously to close the distance between him and Crow Cop so he wouldn't have to worry about those kicks so much. And it seemed to be working. He took Crow Cop down a lot, and Crow Cop is a primarily kickboxer, so he didn't have too much to answer with on the ground, but still looked like he had some hope. But then it was dashed with that punch and Crow Cop taking a face plant. So after the fight, Dana White said that that was probably Crow Cop's retirement bout. We may have seen history yet again, Will Brooks. So your thoughts on Schaub's victory over Crow Cop?
I have to agree with you. With that point taken away, that going into that third round, it could have been either tied or it could have been like Schaub went up by 1 point, which means it could have been a draw, which was actually really exciting for us fans because we knew going into that third round, we're going to see some battle. And they were swinging, and Crow Cop looked great. He looked better than he looked the last, 3 fights I've seen him in. But, yeah, he got caught and just hit the face plant. It was pretty ugly. But, hey, Schaub's the up-and-comer, and he's very talented. Crow Cop, let's face it, his time is gone and past. The
California Kid fighting at bantamweight yet again. This was his UFC debut. I want to keep going back to that countdown show because, obviously, this guy's got star potential. He was the big star of WEC. UFC wanted to make him a star, too. I think he's really going to be one anyway. But as Eddie Winland said in the countdown, I think UFC wants to use this as a springboard, and he's going to stop it. And then they tell the story of his burnt-up little brother who got caught in a bad fire, accidentally started when he was a kid, and now he's an inspiration for him. And how could you root against that? So a lot of backstory going into this, but as it turned out, Uriah Faber given the decision. How do you think his UFC debut went, Will Brooks? Was it blow away enough or good enough?
It was good. Now, first round, he didn't look all that great, but then the second and third round, he came out swinging and kicked Eddie Wineland's ass. I got to give him a lot of credit. He really is his first debut, and he looked good. He didn't look good the first round, but that's why he had those 3 rounds in the fight.
Also on the countdown show, Jon Jones and Shogun Rua was the primary focus, and Mauricio Shogun Rua coming back from surgery for his first defense, and I was scared watching this countdown. When they're replaying him knocking out Chuck Liddell, Machida, and showing his old Pride footage, I got scared, I'll admit. However, a lot of people were saying that Jon Jones was crowned the champion in the media before this bout even happened. I mean, he got his own special on Thursday night. How often does that happen? And I'll admit, I think I should be given some credit because what did I say, the other year? I've been a fan of this guy for a couple years now. I saw him fight at UFC 100 on the prelims, and here we are. He's the new light heavyweight champion, going to be on the Tonight Show this week, the first UFC fighter to be a guest on the show. What did I say? That everyone disagreed with, it seemed? That if you put him in the cage with the champion, he wins? Oh, excuse me, but boy, was I right. Holy fuck. I did not expect him to be this dominant on Shogun Rua. So, Will Brooks, do you think it's just that Jon Jones is that good, or Shogun is just getting a little older? He just didn't seem like he was even in Jon Jones' league. He could barely do anything except try to survive.
Rua, to me, kind of reminded me a lot of Fedor in the sense that he didn't look like he was all in that greatest shape, and he looked like he didn't give a crap to be there. You take out those 2 submission scares, other than that, he had nothing for Jones at all. And not to mention, we all know Jones how much a badass afterwards he apprehended somebody earlier in that day, which is in Patterson, New Jersey. It's like Will just kind of, he just didn't look like he didn't give a shit, just like Fedor. I was like, I'm wondering if he has anything left, or if he just wants the paycheck. What
Will was alluding to, if you don't know, is that Jones and his entourage was trying to find a place in New Jersey to, I guess, meditate or relax or warm up, whatever, sometime before the show earlier in the day, and they chose the beautiful scenic area of Patterson. And the moment they step out, the car door, someone else is trying to steal a GPS from another car, and they ended up chasing him down and apprehending him before the police could get there. And so he's not just a UFC champion, he's a crime-fighting superhero. So what do you think, Will Vafidez, on Jon Jones ascending to stardom and being pretty much the new face of UFC? I think they're really behind him.
Absolutely. I mean, when me and Jay Aletta were watching this the last time he was fighting, I really didn't know much about him. And then when I saw the fight, it was amazing on his last win. And then to come back 3 months later and become the champion at 23 years old, that's just I don't know if there's anything better than that. I don't think there's anything that could be better than that kind of a win against a big name. But Rua didn't fight for like a year either, so I don't know if it's also fair that it's been a while since he fought. Jones is fresh enough where he was ready to go. And Aiden
in the fight with Bader, he didn't take any significant damage, so he was kind of already in fighting shape. They just had to continue that for a couple months.
So I just think that it was an amazing fight to watch. I think for you guys live, it's a moment in history. So that's a good thing to be a part of. Yeah, great fight. I cannot wait to see him fight. I think it's going to really bring that division into a very high standard, as like a top weight division to watch.
Well, there's already drama behind the next bout because just before the fight, they finally came out and said that, all right, if I win, then I'll fight Rashad, because that was their thing for a long time. We're from the same camp, Greg Jackson's camp, and we're not going to fight each other. But apparently there's some rift going on now between Rashad and Greg Jackson, and now they were already positioning that fight to happen. So it looks like it will happen probably later this year, barring no other further injury to Evans in training. But there's hype for that already. So, Will Brooks, you happy that the streak of guys that we want to see win, lose, stopped?
Yes, I am, because, again, if Bones would have lost, we would never watch another fight together. I would have definitely made that stand. But I got to talk about Rashad Evans. I think he's being a real bitch about this whole thing. When he got injured, what was he expecting, the Jones not to take the fight? He wants to be the champion, too. Everybody wants to be the champion. So why wouldn't he take the fight? And the fact that he's, like, acting like he should have taken because he's still a friend, screw that, man. It's a business. You got to become the champion. That's the whole point. If you're not trying to become champion, you're not supposed to be a fighter. Rashad Evans is really overreacting.
Well, I don't think I'm overreacting by saying that Prudential Center sucks. And excuse me for a little rant here for a minute, but I'm telling everybody, never, ever, ever, if you're going to the Prudential Center, The Rock, in Newark, New Jersey, go by car. I am never, ever doing it again. And if you do, make sure you park a long ways away from the building, because they fucking rape you. That's the term that everyone's been using that I went with who drive. You were smart when taking the train, Will, because everyone was saying that they fucking rape you with parking. Can you fucking believe, excuse me for constantly cursing here, but they charge $40 for parking?
I won't buy that $40 parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, you won't be paying anything less than 20, people, believe me. Most are like 35 or some shit. And
yeah, I was there I was there as well for a wrestling event for Hell in a Cell 2 years ago. They got me for $25. I mean,
yeah, that's bad enough. And then you pay fucking $40 for parking, and it's so congested that you won't be getting out for hours. On Saturday night, it was 2 hours after the pay-per-view ended, the event ended, that we finally got out of there. Standing in the cold with hundreds of people, and I think, incidentally, we got out of the same garage before Donald Cerrone even did, so sorry.
I was in hell already.
Yeah, lucky you. So if you're going to go to the Prudential Center, take the train. It's faster, it's cheaper, and, oh, my God, it was just a horrible experience getting out of Prudential Center. So never, ever drive and park at Prudential Center. So consider that a consumer advocate warning from the Wrestling Roundtable. You're welcome. Now, moving on to pro wrestling in a little bit, but first, some of the latest news items at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Bellator Fighting Championship has signed the 2008 Combat Sambo World Championship winner, undefeated heavyweight from Bulgaria, Blagoy Ivanov, who is famous for defeating Fedor Emelianenko in the finals of the Sambo World Championship in 2008. Brian McCarthy of Deer Park, Texas, was charged by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Homeland Security Investigations Unit on Thursday, March 3rd, with 1 count of criminal copyright infringement via ChannelSurfing.net's illegal streaming of UFC, WWE, and other sports programming, making over $90,000 from online merchants and advertising fees. McCarthy had purchased the domain in 2005, and he faces up to 5 years in prison if convicted. And I am very happy to hear that. Don't illegally stream stuff, at least stuff I make. With her contract running out on Tuesday, March 15th, Daphne has filed a workers' comp claim against TNA for injuries she sustained while performing matches for the group. So, good for Daphne, and hope she wins. Hope she sets a precedent there. Just some of the latest news items over at WrestlingRoundtable.com, and we will have another huge news update later in the week. While you're at WrestlingRoundtable.com, be sure to check out the bios, the recaps, Bill Treadway with Raw and many others every week, Zach Fellows with SmackDown every week, and of course, viewer-submitted reviews, columns, polls, chat room, and much more over at WrestlingRoundtable.com, including a shop where you can get the Pro Wrestling Respect DVDs and Wrestling Roundtable T-shirt, modeled by Teresa, as we know from earlier. Jumping back into the world of pro wrestling, going in sequential order, TNA Victory Road 2011. I don't know what road they were on, Corey, but it certainly wasn't the road to victory. A lot of controversy about that main event, but before we get to that, let's talk about some of the undercard matches. Corey, the opener was Bully Ray taking on Tommy Dreamer, ECW, in a Falls Count Anywhere match that, well, at least something stood out for you.
Yeah, this was actually the best match on the card, and that tells you where this pay-per-view is going. And there's 2 spots that took my eye. The first spot, Tommy and Bully Ray go to the crowd because it was announced as the bell rang that they decided to make this a no-holds-barred Falls Count Anywhere match. This was a last-second change. So they're battling in the crowd, and Tommy Dreamer turns around, and there's a Despicable Me plushie, and he uses it to beat Brother Ray, or Bully Ray as he's now called, and Ray sells it like death. So then Dreamer gets him back into the ring, and this is the incident number 2 that happens. He takes Ray into the ring, and he's beating him and beating him and beating him, and all of a sudden, a naked blow-up doll flies into the ring. She lands. Dreamer looks at the doll, looks at the crowd.
You mean she didn't stay suspended in midair, defying physics?
Nope. She floats right in and hits the canvas. Dreamer looks at the crowd, looks at the doll, gets super pumped and angry, beats Bully Ray with the doll, puts her onto the canvas, slams Ray onto her. She bounces. He rolls them over. So
I'm already bored with this, Corey, so let's move on to the tag title match.
Dang.
Sorry, but we need to move on. So the Knockouts tag titles were defended by Winter and Angelina Love against Sarita and Rosita. Now, I'm always sticking up for the real women's wrestlers, quote-unquote. How did this match measure up?
Well, I'm glad Sarita and Rosita won, but the camera wasn't actually on them when they won. Usually they put the camera on whoever wins, as they're holding up the titles. Instead, the camera is on the losers. so it took me a few minutes before I realized who won. These two are really good wrestlers, but how they won was just rather silly, and I now have another reason to smack Russo.
Well, speaking of Russo, as you look at this card going down the lineup, geez, everything's like a stipulation match that's not a title match. Typical Russo. Well, Hernandez beat Matt Morgan in a First Blood match. How did the Mexicano beating down the white boy look, Corey?
Ugly. Very ugly. A fan jumped the ring, and then we found out later he's not really a fan. He's a wrestler from OVW. And Matt Morgan kicked him out of the ring, and then he turns around. Hernandez goes into the camera and blades. And then he takes a vial of fake blood, turns around, and sprays Matt Morgan with it. The referee looks at Hernandez, who's spurting blood, ignores him, turns around, and disqualifies Matt Morgan.
Yeah.
Hopefully sometime soon there's going to be something good pointed out instead of the production fuck-ups. In the Ultimate X match, the champion Kazarian defeated Robbie E., Jeremy Buck, and Max Buck. A lot of people were saying, this was okay, but didn't measure up to past great Ultimate X matches in TNA history. What do you think, Corey?
It was okay. It wasn't the best match, but it was a better match after the last two. I'm kind of glad that Kaz retained. I'm not liking that they want to split up the Young Bucks. That's not cool.
The tag champions Beer Money defeated Inc. Inc., also known, at least one of them, as the Hardy's babysitter. How do you think the tag champs looked this time, Corey?
Beer Money looked pretty good in this match. They did a really great job. And then Inc. Inc., I think, broke up because they had an argument on the ramp. One of them was just staring back at the other two like, I'm sorry, he's my partner.
Inc. Inc. kind of reminds me of the little guys in Spaceballs. Pink, pink. AJ Styles defeated Matt Hardy with Ric Flair. Of course, recently they dropped the whole Immortal thing with a lot of those guys because they couldn't get Booker and Nash back for the main event Mafia angle they wanted to do. So they're like, we need to do something. And they just swerved back to AJ and Beer Money, etc., and Kazarian as faces. So AJ Styles back as a face. Corey, you happy?
I'm glad AJ's a face again. He never should have gone heel. The match was okay, not really all that great, though. I liked, though, that AJ won via the spiral tap, because we don't get to see that anymore. I could have done without Ric Flair groping him, though. That was uncomfortable.
Rob Van Dam versus Mr. Anderson was a number one contenders fight, but ended up in a double countout. So, oh no, I guess there's no number one contender. But how was the match, Corey?
Slow, sloppy. I want my time back. Awful. Bad. No dues again.
This sounds like a date.
The match was just awful. Not as bad as RVD's last pay-per-view match, but just awful. They fell asleep at the bottom of the ramp. They went to sleep device like two little babies.
Well, the person I imagine sleeping was Jeff Hardy up until about maybe 20 minutes before he was set to go on. Probably passed out on a Martin case backstage, and someone had to shake him to wake him up. But that's what people are talking about, so let's get to it now. The main event between Sting and Jeff Hardy. Now, lots of rumors went around the first couple days. A lot of people were saying that it was Sting following through with an audible called by Eric Bischoff, who went out there and told them on the fly to wrap it up early because Jeff was, who knows, fucking high, fucking drunk, whatever. Either way, the unofficial story is that he was in no condition to perform. Jeff Hardy was sent home by TNA from the Impact tapings and house shows the following week or so. And that's about the most that they've done disciplinary-wise to Jeff Hardy, who we all know had a drug problem even before he came to TNA. His trial is still ongoing if it doesn't get delayed up until the next 10 years. But some people thought, maybe this is just a work in typical Russo Bash at the Beach 2000 style where they're trying to make it like Charlie Sheen, except, of course, TNA is anything but winning. Let's see what everyone thinks about the 30-second or so main event that everyone was so upset about.
Whether it's a work or not, I don't know. All I know is it wasn't entertaining. But if the whole point was to get people talking about TNA, I guess it worked. I think Jeff Hardy was that fucked up. Bischoff had to do what he had to do. I believe it was all real. But I wouldn't be surprised if they said, hey, Will, it's a work.
Hey, Will, was it a work?
No. This is something I felt pretty strong for because as a pro wrestler, if I had to go against somebody who was really that messed up. My health was on the line. I would take great offense to that. You could see a video online that goes over pretty much every portion of that match where you see something happen, where either the referee showing up the X sign or all that stuff. You know, it's a pretty good video to look at, pointing out all the facts that happened on that show. It's just amazing. You'd think they would know this, that they're hiring a guy who had a drug problem. Why do you think WWE didn't resign? I guess Jeff Hardy didn't resign with WWE, went right to TNA in the middle of this drug problem. And this is what TNA deserves. He's done this the second time now on a show, and this time people's hard-earned money, $35 to $40, was spent on this. He basically destroys TNA all on by himself. People paid for the pay-per-view and got ripped off. It mind boggles me that, you know, TNA did not see this coming. I don't get it. I don't think I've ever seen that before, where a main event is 88 seconds. I just don't get it, and this is why I don't watch the product anymore. I have absolutely no interest in TNA. Who would want to order another pay-per-view after seeing that, honestly? Would any of you on the panel would want to watch a pay-per-view with 88-second main events?
Absolutely
not. None of us
not.
wanted to watch a pay-per-view of theirs before, so I don't see how this changes anything.
It changes a lot of things. This is a bad thing, a very bad thing for them. Imagine if WrestleMania went a minute and 30 seconds. Would you ever order a WrestleMania again or any WWE pay-per-view? It's bad. This is going to take a long road for them to recover. I don't think the ratings really changed, but they're going to have those TNA loyal fans. But I'm not even interested in Lockdown, and it's a big pay-per-view for them. I'm just not interested anymore. I lost it. I lost all interest in TNA.
Prince Nana, what do you think?
That idiot, that fool!
I don't even know how that guy got through the curtain, how they could let him out there. They should have stopped him immediately and called the audible before he got through. You throw out Anderson and RVD in a triple threat now with Sting. You don't let that man even go through the curtain.
When I found out that it went 30 seconds, without knowing the backstory first, I thought that in and of itself isn't so bad, I don't think. In fact, I would love, frankly, Will, just once for a wrestling company to book it that way, not to cover up themselves. Just because I think it's pretty lame that it's so set that every pay-per-view has to have a 20-minute main event, and it has to be this long to be satisfying. I would just like the spontaneity of shit to happen like that, like a couple WrestleManias ago when Kane squashed Chavo in like 8 seconds to win the ECW title.
That's a whole different story. That's a whole different thing, man. It's not the main event of the show. It's not
I'm talking about the main event. I just want it to happen once. And I don't understand that because, see, I'm different in the sense because when people would complain, let's say, about Mike Tyson pay-per-views in the 80s, late 80s, oh, he paid $40 or whatever for this, and the main event went like 20 seconds. Well, that's what I want. I want to see someone get their ass kicked. And I know this is wrestling and it's different. However, I'm just saying I want to see it at least once for the spontaneity. However, you are absolutely right in that going off the air half an hour early is ridiculous. That's not even to bring up the point that people have that even putting Jeff Hardy out there, if he's truly in no condition to perform, and having him even in the potential harm of taking a move, who knows? It just was a really bad idea in the whole first place to even put him out there if he was in that condition. That being said, we can't undo that. What do you do from there? Like Chris was saying, it took what? When you thought of that idea, Chris, all of probably 10 seconds to come up with that scenario?
Well, there's the thing. There's a thing about that. I actually thought. TNA,
yes.
Nobody uses their heads. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand how that company's in business still to even begin with. People are saying, oh, no one's going to order a Lockdown. People are going to order it. The same people, the same 2 million people or whatever, watch that show every week. The same people will order the pay-per-view every month. They're not going to win fans, but I don't think they're going to lose any fans either.
Back to the
ratings for Impact even went up, I believe, this week too.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe people were just trying to see what happened.
And that's my first thought was too, but then I read that it actually increased throughout the entire show, which is just bizarre.
Well, back to the thinking thing. It took me all of 10 seconds when I saw the situation there where, okay, Jeff Hardy's in no condition to wrestle, and they have half an hour worth of pay-per-view time slot to fill. Well, fucking duh. Just the previous match ended with the double count out in the number one contenders spot. All you have to do, and if you really want to bury him just in case he goes to fucking jail, which more than likely he won't with a plea deal, but if you really want to wash your hands of him, just have Sting grab the mic and say, I just beat this guy in 30 seconds. Clearly he's no competition. I'm a fighting champion. Let's bring both Mr. Anderson and Rob Van Dam out here. Really? Is it that hard? And on top of that, like I'm sure you would probably think, Corey, this is a pay-per-view that had no Samoa Joe, no Pope, no many other people. I wouldn't even count Kurt Angle and Abyss because they're in storyline reasons for not being able to wrestle, fine. But there's plenty of people who you could have even thrown in there. Let's make it a fucking four-way. Who cares?
They could have put in anybody. Great idea. Since RVD and Ken Anderson both had rematch clauses that nobody has addressed on television yet, throw them in and fire Jeff Hardy's fucking ass. I'm sorry to swear, Eric, but fire his ass.
So unladylike.
I'm sorry.
Kids look up to this guy. You know, he's the guy that a lot of people would buy his figure. I've still gotten it, you know, when I sell my figures at a flea market. And I even go to these kids and like, listen, did you not just watch that guy on TNA and the way he looked and the way he acted? You should be ashamed to wear that crap. Because that's basically what it is. You're supporting a guy that does drugs. Imagine if the parents found out what this guy was like. It was just like, forget it.
The parents
well, we all about the whole Coke and stuff. He did drugs.
The parents that bring their kids to TNA shows have access to newspapers, Wikipedia, news outlets. They already know that this guy is on drugs. If you are a mom...
please, Corey, you know Americans don't use those things.
If you're a mom or a dad and you hear that this guy is on drugs and you watch him go into withdrawal after Sting has just beaten him in a minute 28, what kind of parent are you if you're still letting your kid buy this guy's action figure? What the hell are you thinking as a parent?
What kind of parent would let their kids watch TNA in the first place?
Well, certainly it's bad for my health. But moving aside, if I was the promoter and my booking staff had just let this fool go out to the ring and lose in 1 minute 28 seconds, I would take Russo out to the ring and I would shoot him in front of the crowd. I would want witnesses.
That doesn't sound very nice, Corey.
I know it's not very nice, but wouldn't you want to shoot the booker after that, or at least fire him?
I don't want to shoot Vince Russo.
No, you don't want to shoot anybody. I mean, and again, you can't really put Russo on this one. This is a TNA not paying attention.
It's a company-wide thing.
No, it's a company-wide thing, but it's an individual's problem. It's not really TNA. It's TNA's problem, but it's an individual's actions that caused this to happen. So,
okay, it's Jeff Hardy's individual action that caused it to happen, but it's TNA's fault for hiring him in the first place, letting him go on pay-per-view anyway, and then everything we just talked about. I think you can't just direct it from just Jeff Hardy. Everyone's got to be responsible for this.
No, and I agree with that. In this situation, though, you couldn't blame Russo because everyone likes to blame Russo for everything in TNA. No,
okay,
I mean,
here's what I would have done. I would have taken the whole booking staff out. I would have had Sting flog them with the title. I would have explained to them, you are now fired, Bischoff. And then I would have turned to Jeff Hardy. I would have informed him the police are waiting backstage because I called them as soon as I saw you go into convulsions. Go to jail. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I would have had the police escort Jeff Hardy from ringside. I would have offered the fans a refund, and then I would have found a competent wrestler to send to the ring for this title match, and I would have restarted the match. I would not have let the feed cut off a half an hour early. That is not professional. In
their defense, I don't think they even knew what was wrong with him because I just don't think they saw it until he probably went through the curtain that there was something wrong. I don't think they would have let him out there knowing his state. I think they actually did not know until they saw him leave that curtain. Then I think they called an audible at that point.
Let's hear what some of the callers think of this and whatever else they want to talk about. Ryan from Massachusetts, Corey's friend from the message board. Hello.
Can I have your attention, please?
Oh, God.
I just put my thoughts up on the message board saying, wait a minute, Russo, Hogan, Bischoff, a crap product? Dear God, I see where this is going. How long do you guys think until we have a TNA reboot?
They are pretty trendy right now in the movie industry, so you never know.
WrestleMania 9 had a 21-second main event, and people seem to love that.
Oh, well, I didn't love it, that's for sure. 908 area code, you're on with Wrestling Roundtable. Name and location, please. I'm sorry, 904. Excuse me.
Oh, okay. This is Travis from Jacksonville. I'm Turbo Bison in the forum. UFC 128. Jon Jones just systematically destroyed Shogun. And I don't know if you guys agree with this or not. It was almost Anderson-esque.
Oh, absolutely.
Where it wasn't even like he was trying. He just, I don't know who in that division could get with him. This is because of the reach. The reach alone, he can just keep you away. And he just took Shogun down without even trying. And it's going to be a better fight with Rashad being, two state wrestlers. But I just don't see how Rashad has any chance against Jones. That's just me.
Well, the Anderson-Silva comparison is something that I think some people have been making. Not only the youngest champion now in UFC history, the one with the longest reach, Anderson-Silva is still being talked about for a GSP fight that Dana White keeps denying is going to happen. But Anderson-Silva, I guess, has said that he wants to stay at middleweight. Dana White said that when he went up to light heavyweight, that was because he was pushing for it. And even though he did real well in the couple fights that he did do at light heavyweight, apparently he's going to stay at middleweight, even though some people thought he could fight at heavyweight. So is that a dream match that people are still hoping for, Chris, or are they more caught up in the GSP dream fight?
I think more of the GSP dream fight. I think that's more people want to see. I would love to see it.
Ben from Austin, Texas. Hello.
Hello. I guess some people, I started watching TNA with January 4th.
That's when you started with TNA?
I started a little when Hogan announced he was there. I figured, I should check this out. I briefly channel flipped it, but never really caught my interest. But it seemed to catch my eye this time with Hogan coming along.
Okay.
And at least up until Bound for Glory, I was enjoying TNA. I grew up as a WCW fan. Nothing against WWF or anything, but
this must be bringing bad memories back for you, then.
Yeah, exactly. I've never seen any of these guys before. Yeah, sure, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were there, and there were some bad things, but the good outweighed the bad. But as soon as Bound for Glory hit, it seemed to me that everything hit the fan. And a little bit after that, I got employed, and I kind of didn't watch TNA. And I recently started watching it again, and I can't believe it's even the same programming that I watched. I had liked it, and it seems to all have gone in the toilet, and just like I think Will alluded to, I'm not watching TNA anymore, especially after this pay-per-view. I can't continue to support a product like this. It's just garbage. I mean, I know WWE isn't that great, but I prefer what they do more than what TNA is doing more. And I want TNA to succeed as a still fan of WCW.
I love WCW as well, but TNA, it's funny, if you go back to our first season and go back to our first show a little over 3 years ago, which is not only available on YouTube, but you can get it on iTunes. Will Vafidez keeping up our archive on iTunes, which has our complete listing of shows, including the entire first season, not all of which is available on YouTube anymore. But if you go to iTunes, type Wrestling Roundtable, or go to WrestlingRoundtablePodcast.com, and you can hear a lot of our older shows. So if people keep saying stuff like, when are you going to do best tag teams or factions or this and that? Well, people, I'm going to rip my hair out when I hear this shit one more time because we've covered all that before. Check out our website. It's got the listing for every show we have. So if you haven't seen it, it's probably there. But back to our first show. We started off with, did WCW create stars? The second show was the state of TNA. And a lot of people have been making the comparison between WCW and TNA a lot, and it's usually negative stuff. And as someone who lived through the last couple years of WCW when it was on its last legs, you can see that. And of course it makes sense. It's a lot of the same people running the show, performing the show, even directing the show, a lot of the staff. So it all kind of makes sense, and it just is really disheartening that none of these people have learned from history, not only other people's mistakes but their own. The ones that they've made in TNA has always been really stupid, frankly, from the first show on. Every step forward, whatever it might have been, there's multiple steps back. That's why the second show we ever did in December of 2007 was the state of TNA. There's so many problems with this company. What can they do to fix it? And the story hasn't changed all these years later. It just seems to be getting worse and worse. 201 area code. Name and location, please.
Hello, this is Gerard from New Jersey. I just have to watch because I'm not going to pay for TNA. I kind of lost that hope when I saw Joe lose to Christian.
You know what? I read that news story about the bootlegger before and the illegal streaming. If it's a product that you believe in, pay for it. But really, if someone has such bad reputation like this, I think it's kind of deserved.
It wouldn't have been so bad if Jeff Hardy didn't try to kick out. You could obviously tell it wasn't a work. Jeff Hardy tried to kick out.
In other words, like, hey, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, he did try to kick out, and the ref just ignored him.
Exactly. I usually don't agree with Corey. That was just... I really wish I could have gone now.
Okay, let's move on.
I think you should just let him giggle for a couple minutes. That would have been pretty entertaining.
Nicholas Wilborn in Indiana. Hello.
Hello. TNAs need to really seriously think about the drug policy.
What drug policy?
Yeah. Here's the thing. If they continue doing this, it will attract more people from WWE or other independent, other companies who have drug problems and continue this reign like Jeff Hardy. I see their company going down because they're going to have a lot of serious troubles with people, wrestlers having drug problems, might OD or dying from it. In case of Jeff Hardy, we could have saw a train wreck. I think this could be Jeff Hardy's rock bottom. I don't see this company lasting that long. I see WWE buying TNA within a year or two.
That's if they think their video library has much value, maybe a little. But you bring up the drug policy, and ever since they started getting investigated by the government, led by Henry Waxman in the post-Benoit days, I mean, he who we do not speak of, there were interviews by the government officials on Vince McMahon and Stephanie McMahon and Dixie Carter, and of course, they say they have a drug policy in TNA.
Sorry.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, you're on the air. Anyway, as I was saying, there has not, to my knowledge, ever been one drug suspension from TNA. Now, we haven't heard a lot of suspensions in WWE lately, which probably indicates they're not doing that much. Because, you know, whenever WWE starts their drug testing, it lasts for, a couple years, and then they just eventually fade away once people stop paying attention. Well, at least we heard when WWE would suspend people. You may remember the Signature Pharmacy bust, where a whole crop of guys got suspended all at once. Umaga, Simon Dean, Santino, etc., whoever got caught in that, except, of course, Randy Orton and Batista, because we need some pay-per-view main events. Suspend Regal instead. Not once has, to my knowledge, anyone been suspended from TNA because of drug testing, but imagine that continuing with Jeff Hardy still on their roster and this happening. He was just sent home. Someone coming home this time is Brett Simonello, also known as Midge. Hello, Brett.
Hey, guys, what's up?
Glad to have you on because we want to move on to Ring of Honor. This past weekend, Ring of Honor presented Manhattan Mayhem IV in the Manhattan Center, which is above the Hammerstein Ballroom. Now, Midge, you'd been saying to me for years, I'm going to go to Ring of Honor show, and you finally did, to hang out and check it out for the first time. So how'd you think Ring of Honor did? What was your impression?
I think they made a fan out of me. They announced their next show in June, and I'm already looking forward to it. My only thing was I thought there would be a little less of the talking, which we talked about when we were the show, and more of the wrestling, but what are you going to do?
I'm going to go to Chris. That's what I'm going to do. The opener was Michael Elgin and Mike Mundo against Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly. Cole and O'Reilly, I believe, really impressed you from the previous show against All Night Express in that really hot opener at the iPay-per-view. So what'd you think of them against the House of Truth with the unofficial, official new member?
It was a pretty good match, but a lot of the first half just suffered from way too much talking with like 10-minute promos, which we just always laugh about. That time Jim Cornette came out, we're here to do the wrestling and not talk, and then he'll talk to you for 20 minutes about crap. Kyle and O'Reilly, they're really good. I think they're a good tag team. Ring of Honor seems to be really centered on those, like maybe because of Cornette these days. Backstage, they really are taking the tag divisions. The other two companies are lacking right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the New York crowd was way too harsh on Michael Elgin? Because I do.
Yeah, but that's New York for you. I was telling Brett before, I can't remember the last time I saw a pre-show there because the crowd would just shit all over those kids.
I don't know if that's the reason, but Moving on, the new member of the Embassy, Tommaso Ciampa, against Grizzly Redwood, both of whom, I might add, are cameoed in the Wrestling Road Diaries. How'd you think Grizz did, Chris?
Oh, that's usually my cue to go to the bathroom.
Oh, man.
That's pretty harsh. See, I think Grizzly Redwood has done more with a bad gimmick than almost anybody that I could think of recently. I think he's actually one of the smartest wrestlers that is on the Ring of Honor roster, which sounds absurd, but what I mean by that is he's the only guy that wrestles for his size. We've seen other smaller wrestlers of his stature, let's say, who wrestle doing ridiculous power moves that just are ridiculous. Ridiculous. But Grizzly does stuff that actually makes sense and works for him, and I think he's got good form. What do you think, Midge?
I actually liked Grizzly a lot more than I liked the Tom Chapo guy. I feel like he was supposed to be this super beast, and he just really didn't come off as strong, I guess, as the Embassy wanted him to be, as an enforcer type of character. The interaction with the rest of the Embassy in the match kind of saved it, made it a little more entertaining for me. Grizzly planned to kiss on Mia Yim, get his little revenge, their little heated war words there.
Trademark Cornette spot.
The Embassy has never been the strongest group in Ring of Honor, but they seem to have really, really gone downhill the last few years.
I do like how Ernie Osiris is pulling off his little mini angle, I guess, with R.D. Evans, whatever it's leading to, but it's just a little detail that I noticed, and I'm a fan of Ernie as well, but that segued into Steve Corino against the Prodigy Mike Bennett. Is he the Prodigy, Chris? Did he earn that name?
I don't think I've seen enough of him to really make a decision on that. He doesn't seem that bad, but he seems like a typical OVW guy to me.
Brett?
That manager that was bigger and older and kind of pointless that he had with him kind of took away from me for a little bit. I didn't know what he was doing out there. He didn't seem to make any sense. And if this guy's going to be a prodigy, why is he being trained by somebody that just looks like he should be belonging in a bar smoking a cigarette? It didn't make any sense to me. Corino's Corino.
A lot of traffic around ringside for this first half, huh, Chris?
Oh, yeah, there was more managers than wrestlers.
Well, Prodigy, I think he's all right.
My biggest problem with him, though, is why does he have the manager or whatnot, but if he does all the talking still? What does he need the manager for? I don't get this.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think Mike Bennett's got a really great dropkick. Everyone always just decides all of a sudden, every once in a while in a promotion, who's got the best dropkick. That's Rhett Titus now in Ring of Honor. It reminds me of when Michaels went solo as the Heartbreak Kid in '92, and all of a sudden, Shawn Michaels has the best dropkick in the WWF. Like, really? I mean, it's okay, but I don't think it was blow-away enough to be like, holy shit, he's got the best dropkick. And sorry, Rhett, that's how I felt about every time you slap your legs. But Prodigy, I think, has some really good form for someone his size. I was pretty impressed, not only with him getting up there like that, but he doesn't slap his legs. Oh, it's such a relief. Brings me back to the days before slapping on every move. Can you imagine that, Chris? Like 20 years ago, whatever, when we started watching wrestling, that it was only like one move that people slapped their leg on, the super kick maybe, or Enziguri, and now it's on every fucking move.
Especially in the indies.
Oh, that's what I mean. This is like the newest indie trend. Like years ago, it was the double stomp and the Shining Wizard. And now everyone has the slap on everything. And years ago,
I think it's MMA's popularity has brought it up. Everybody wants to seem like they have they're stiff.
I just mentioned Rhett Titus, and he was in the next bout. All Night Express against the Briscoes. Rhett, I think, getting the biggest pin of his career. He reversed the Doomsday Device as Mark was springing off for a clothesline springboard that Rhett turned into a victory roll on Jay, and he pinned Jay Briscoe. That was surprising, and congratulations to Rhett. That's pretty cool. So what do you think about that tag match, Midge? Yet another blow-away tag for Ring of Honor?
I did like this one, and Chris actually had to explain it to me for a little bit. This really was my first time being a fan of Ring of Honor, so I don't know the backstories and everything. I guess as a typical New York fan, I was already rooting for Kenny King and Rhett Titus against the southern assholes of Briscoes. I had no idea they were baby faces, so I guess they did a really good job of playing the heels in New York.
Interfered in the Motor City Machine Guns match the other year. They've been heels in New York ever since.
Yeah, well, see, I didn't know that, and they still came across as it to me when I thought they were supposed to be the good guys. But so they played that off really well, and even that like whole melee after the match, they went to the floor, took up the the match and everything. Good old entertaining match.
This is the point of the show where it finally picked up. It was a great match. That finally kind of woke me up after those first three. As that show was running late already as it was, definitely needed that fast-paced, good tag team match. You can always count on the Briscoes to deliver. Kenny King and Rhett have been a great tag team the last few years.
After intermission, we came back to see El Generico against T.J. Perkins. T.J. Perkins, who I'm a fan of, Midge, but I guess this is your first impression seeing the clown of El Generico. What'd you think?
This is actually where I went to go take my break, and it was my turn to get the beers. I was really kind of bored by both guys, maybe because I don't know any history between the two of them. Well,
there is none.
At first sight, I wasn't interested in either one of them, so I took that opportunity to make my beer run. So I really didn't see too much of this match.
All right, Chris, what'd you think of the match before and after the beer?
I really like T.J. Perkins. I know you told me he'd been around for a long time, but I've only been exposed to him a few times in Ring of Honor. I'd never seen him before. I think Final Battle was his first show there, maybe.
The first one in New York, I believe. That was where he fought Ben. And like I told you, the night before in Boston, I think that was in December, he had a match against Kyle O'Reilly that was just off the charts. One of the best wrestling matches that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. The crowd was chanting, "Please come back" at the end, and that's one of the. I would definitely like to see him come back again.
Then we move on to the tag title match. Well, I'm sorry, the belts weren't on the line, but the champions were in it. Yeah. Kings of Wrestling against LAX of Homicide and Hernandez. Hernandez returning to Ring of Honor. How'd you think he looked, Midge?
Absolutely my favorite match of the night. Years ago, you had told me about Homicide, how he's the new Jack of ROH, and I still never saw him.
I never used those terms.
Anyway, it was my first chance to see them, and Hernandez and Homicide, they were just that balls-to-the-wall, brawling type of match that I really enjoyed. And it was, pretty entertaining when he kicked his own partner and then, the border toss, he tossed him right out into the ring onto the Kings of Wrestling. That was a pretty cool thing to see. Probably my favorite match of the whole night.
Kings of Wrestling are a favorite of Ring of Honor's fans. I think it's easy to say that they're the top draw in Ring of Honor, not only in terms of selling merchandise and tickets, but just listen to the reactions they get. Chris, your thoughts on the tag match with LAX?
I need to air my biggest grievance with Ring of Honor lately.
Uh-oh.
Why are we having non-title tag matches that the champions always win?
It's not just the tag belts.
Yeah, I know they do it. Well, recently from the shows I've been at, with Haas and Benjamin, this is just so stupid. Just add a little more drama to the match where, wow, maybe Hernandez is going to stick around now. Maybe Shelton and Charlie are going to be here for a while if they win these belts. It, to me, is so stupid to not be putting these belts on the line.
Well, I'll give you an example just from Ring of Honor's own history, because I'm pretty sure the idea is that, they haven't won a match in Ring of Honor. They haven't even wrestled in Ring of Honor before. Why should we give them a title shot? They've got to earn it. And I think the idea is to make the title matches, when they do happen, mean more. That's the theory. I don't think it works.
Then don't burn them in against the tag champions. Put them against the Briscoes or something. There's plenty of other tag teams there.
Well, I don't think it works. Just to give you an example from Ring of Honor's own history, we'll apply that logic to Lance Storm then. Lance Storm didn't even have a match in Ring of Honor, and he got a title shot against Danielson because he's a star. He's had credentials from elsewhere, and I think you could easily say the same thing about Haas and Benjamin, LAX, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I just don't get this. And even going back to years ago, I believe it was one of the Glory by Honors, Nigel was the champion, I believe. He didn't defend his belt against somebody from Japan, but wound up winning the match. It was something like that. I don't remember what the exact details were, but it was ridiculous.
Well, what about the match itself, aside from that?
Oh, it was a good match. Homicide and Hernandez always deliver together. It was good seeing them back together and not having to watch TNA to get to see it. And Kings of Wrestling are definitely the best tag team going right now on the indies. Chris Hero, I used to hate him, but he has got to be one of the most improved wrestlers over the last few years.
It really shows.
I did enjoy his first run, though, with Claudio, but I really think that was Claudio doing it for me. When they split up, I couldn't stand Hero.
Before the main event, it was pure champion, TV champion, Christopher Daniels against Davey Richards in a pure rules match. If you were there in New York, you saw Davey Richards attempt the shooting star press but land on the turnbuckle, and I think it's a real credit to the wrestlers in the ring that afterwards we were talking about whether it was planned or not. Now, on one hand, we think Davey Richards is just nuts enough to actually try a spot like that where it was a worked botch, but it wasn't planned, and Davey Richards said he might not be doing that shooting star anymore. And luckily, he wasn't hurt, but like I was saying, it's a credit to the wrestlers in the ring that they covered it so well that we couldn't even tell if it was planned or not, because usually when you see a botch and wrestlers scramble to a finish, it's kind of obvious. This wasn't so much, so congratulations to them, and thankfully Davey's not hurt. So what'd you think of the match, Chris?
I thought it was a great match. I like Davey a lot. Daniels has been delivering great matches for years. It's interesting to see what this TV title is going to turn into, and now that supposedly Daniels is back in TNA, all the drama that's going along with it. But even if it's the last we get to see of him in Ring of Honor live, I enjoyed it.
But you probably saw my sour puss on my face when I was explaining what pure rules were. It's like, oh, great, this is going to be a blood fest. They both won me over, especially after the ropes were in play, I believe was the call. And they were able to do the crazy, like, submissions in the ropes and stuff like that. They both put on a really good match, a lot better than what my expectations were. And Chris warned me or told me, he was telling me about Davey Richards, probably one of the best wrestlers in ROH. He does one stupid thing every match. He's going to do it, but otherwise he's a really, really good wrestler. And, you know, that shooting star fest kind of just made a truth believer out of Chris there.
I love Davey, but he always does something. He just attempts something stupid in every match that I just put my head down every time.
What do you mean by stupid?
Like, he just, like, something like when he jumps out into the crowd, and it's just, you know, he's going to get so badly hurt one day doing this stuff. And his career
looks like he's going to break his back on that guardrail someday.
Yeah, one day, and I have to groan and just like, why in 2011 are guys still doing this to their bodies?
Because if it's not the best match of the night, then it's no good for Davey Richards.
I do want to say one thing about Christopher Daniels that I gained a little bit of, I gained some respect for him. In the
violating his ROH contract by going to TNA anyway.
Yes, well, it actually has to do with that. During his entrance, Arena started chanting, fuck TNA, and then he said, no, don't do that, and then he pointed to ROH, and then he got a big ROH chant going. It said, don't talk about another crappy company, be proud of yours. So that was kind of cool.
It ain't so crappy if it's paying your bills.
Well, no.
But anyway.
Well, I will chant for TNA if they're paying my bills, let's be honest. I can be bought.
Yes, you can. That's pretty clear. Moving on to the main event with the world champion, Roderick Strong, defending against Eddie Edwards. And I think that the ending of this match, shocking to say the least. I think, Chris, it was a fine match. Getting towards the end, the near falls were really good, but I think it was just more in the we're playing along sort of degree. Like, the fans were into the match and they were into the near falls and everything, but I don't think anybody really expected a title change, which is
no, nobody did. You saw so many people getting up and leaving.
The WWE house show across the street in MSG, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, was about to start. So I don't think anybody was expecting a title change, and that's why when he did make the pinfall, you could hear that eruption from the crowd. It was a level up from how into the match they already were. So your thoughts on Eddie Edwards besting Roderick Strong? I know you were pretty happy.
Oh, yeah, the awful reign of Roderick is over. Not that he's a bad wrestler. I don't like the guy. He has no personality. He had no business holding that belt for 6 months, in my opinion. He has good matches, and look at the level of people he's competing with, who didn't have a good match with Danielson during his title run. But it was a big shock. Eddie is now the first Triple Crown champion ever in Ring of Honor history. Never would have expected that.
The match itself was a good championship match. I agree with Chris about Roderick Strong. It's good skills. He just doesn't carry himself, I guess, as a champion. Like when he was in the ring, unless he had a belt on, I really wouldn't have known he was the top dog in the company. He didn't give that off to me. Eddie Edwards seems to carry himself a little better. Like he seems like one of those guys that when he truly appreciates what happened at the end of that match, he looks like he can be one of your people's champions that the whole ROH gets behind, and one day when he loses it to some heel, people are going to go, Corey's probably going to have a shit fit about it.
No, don't worry, the Ring of Honor fans will turn on him in about 3 weeks.
Will they? Is that what happens? Bunch of guys. And that celebration seemed a little lackluster to me. So when all your top guys come out and celebrate with your new champion as opposed to, like 4 or 5 guys came out and started.
Everybody else is probably across the street already.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. I don't think there was really time for the grandiose celebration at the end. They were already going long.
His tag team partner came out in bare feet, like somebody just sent him out there, hey, stupid, you got to go out. Maybe it was old-timer strength, I guess, but the celebration that could have been a little better or even nothing at all. Maybe just the partner.
Yeah, if you're going to do it right.
Well, I've seen Eddie Edwards really grow over the years. I believe I've mentioned it on the show before. I had heard that maybe he was being considered to be Ring of Honor champion. Of course, it seemed like Davey was next in line, but this, of course, took a lot of people by shock, including myself. I think that if Eddie was going to win the title, it was the perfect place. He's the most over in New York than anywhere else in Ring of Honor circuit because of his performance a couple years ago with the ladder match where he broke his arm in Boston the day before against Kevin Steen, and still, with a cast on and everything, defended the belts with Davey against Steen and Generico, and he's been a favorite in New York ever since, so this was the best place for him to win it, and it was a really cool moment. I was really happy for Eddie, and not saying that just because he got fucked up a lot and fought through it, he deserves it. He's talented in the ring, and that's why he deserved it as well. So, congratulations, Eddie Edwards, and hopefully it goes well. 517 area code. Name and location, please.
Jimmy from Virginia. Congrats to Eddie Edwards on his big title win and everything. I didn't get to be there, and I've been there for most of the title changes lately. 4 o'clock shows aren't my thing in the slightest. Especially
hey, you should have gone to UFC afterwards with me.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, especially since at the last minute I actually decided to order the pay-per-view just to check it out. I was surprised to see Jones go in there and just completely demolish him. Just something that I didn't see coming. I mean, I've seen Jones. I've loved him. He's really fun to watch fight and everything. But, Mauricio's been so good over his career, and then that just really seemed like the nail in the coffin for Shogun if he's going to go in there. And, I heard some of the guys talking earlier saying he just looked like he didn't care. And at the first thing I said when I saw him fight was, wow, he really just looks like he'd rather be in a lot of different places right now than in this ring defending his belt.
But you know what? I mentioned Japan before. It doesn't look like that's going to be much of an option soon. And if he's done with UFC at any point, I guess they have to negotiate with Strikeforce now.
Exactly. He's going to have his own problems. If he doesn't want to be in UFC, then, I got some beer league places down here in Virginia that run shows, but they're not going to pay him the kind of coin he's making in UFC.
Well, I didn't mean to divert you away from Eddie Edwards. I was kind of surprised that you didn't come up this time because it was kind of a show in a sense, but as you were saying about Eddie Edwards.
I've been a big fan of Eddie. I was a big fan of him when he was diehard and he had the stupid little cornrows and everything. But seeing him tag with Davey, I was convinced that this was going to be a really good match between Eddie and Roderick and that Roderick would retain the belt because my girlfriend's favorite wrestler is Eddie. And she was like, man, I wonder if he's going to win the belt. And me and my mom both looked at her and said, it'd be really cool, but there's just no chance. They're just grooming Davey for that belt. And then I just get on the internet on my phone on the way home, and God forbid if he didn't just win it, didn't he?
Well, see, in a sense, I'm glad that it also happened, not just because of how good it was a moment for Eddie, but because you want to create that atmosphere or that feeling of anything can happen.
Exactly. And it's like nobody thought it wasn't an internet pay-per-view. It was in New York, but everybody said, the title's only going to change hands on internet pay-per-views. It's getting predictable. And then they do something like that. And that's good booking by Delirious, is to think of doing something like that and just completely throwing everybody for a loop. Because everybody's sitting back saying it's only a matter of time. Davey's going to win the belt. He says the next time he challenges for it is going to be his last time against Roderick. If he doesn't win it, then he won't challenge for it anymore. And everybody's like, we just got to sit back and wait, and then we know he's going to win. Like when Tyler Black won, or when we knew Black was going to lose it to Roderick. We knew going to that show Roderick was taking the belt. Just sometimes it's circumstances. It's nothing against how it happens. Sometimes it's just how it happens. But to see something like that happen, it really does create that atmosphere that every show you go to can be a big one and something special can happen.
That being said, don't you think this New York title change, this stuff needs to stop at this point? This is like, what, the 4th title change in New York in a row?
Yeah, exactly, because the only other time I remember being shocked when I was watching Ring of Honor at least live anyway, was when I was in Philly and I saw Takeshi Morishima beat Homicide.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big shocker to me. But it was like now they've stopped running Philly, so it's like it kind of threw a wrench into everything. Like outside of Chicago or maybe Toronto, you don't really think of anything anywhere else where a title would change hands. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember like there were days when in New Jersey when Nigel beat Morishima for the belt.
Danielson won it in Long Island.
Exactly, when he took it from Gibson. Then you would think there were a couple of different places where you could take it, where you could see it taken. But everybody's starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, this is a big match, it's in New York, it's going to change hands, and it'll happen in New York. And maybe it starts to make fans in other markets feel a little jaded, like especially in a place like Chicago, where they've come out before in droves to see them, and Chicago tends to be a pretty good market for Ring of Honor. Now they're not getting any title changes. You know, have they even gotten a tag title change in a while over there?
Corey? Glad to see you're paying attention.
Something on the chat.
Anyway, let's move on. Thanks for calling, Jimmy. You should call him some more. So, Corey, I want to go to another call, but before I do, your thoughts on Eddie Edwards winning the title?
I think it's really cool. Another cool thing is that as he won, he trended on Twitter for 4 hours. The average TV wrestler does not trend on Twitter more than 15 minutes. Eddie trended for 4 hours. That shows me that this was not just big for Ring of Honor. It's big for indie wrestling as a whole. People were talking about this for hours. People were talking about this into the next day. That's really cool. Plus, if he puts the title on the line against Davey Richards, think of what that's going to mean. These are former tag team champions, and they've got a lot of history together. This has set Ring of Honor up for some really cool main events. I'm really happy. Eddie Edwards is a great wrestler, and I'm glad he got the belt.
Excellent. 619, hey, name and location.
Hey, this is Samuel from San Diego.
How alliterative. What's on your mind, Samuel from San Diego?
Nice to know. Your thoughts on the current MMA promotions, and also which one do you think is doing the best shows? The major promotions, I mean, and what do you think of the current WrestleMania card?
Well, there really aren't that many MMA promotions anymore, as we talked about earlier. But we had just gone to Strikeforce, and turns out, Will, it was more historic than we thought. The last non-Zuffa promoted. I thought it was a great show. We talked about it on the radio show a couple weeks ago, but I was just talking to Lawrence. You remember that name, right, fans? He was asking me what I'm doing for WrestleMania, and I was non-committal. But he asked about Hooters, and I haven't been to Hooters in a long time. Chris, last time we went was for GSP and Koscheck, right?
I believe so. I think that we didn't go for Anderson Silva's fight. I was in Virginia, so no, it would definitely be George St. Pierre's fight.
Right. And we haven't gone for wrestling in I don't even know how long.
Since Elimination Chamber 2010, I believe.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's the last one we went to for that.
Well, I told him, well, I haven't been in a while, and then it occurred to me that's because by the time we get to May, I will have gone to 3 out of 4 of the UFC pay-per-views this year. So I think I'm a pretty big fan. UFC generally produces great shows even on free TV. It's usually entertaining, and I'm, of course, a big UFC fan. As far as the other promotions, I've been to one Bellator show. It was the first show for them in Philadelphia, which we talked about on the show as well. I think it was in October, and that was pretty good. Now, the thing is, I've talked about indie MMA promotions before on the show, and even though they fucking way overcharge for prices, and you don't see a lot of names, most of these guys, not all of them, because certainly there's a lot of cans out there with like 0-3 records, but there's a lot of good fighters, too, that you'll see locally. So if you can find a cheaper price than $50 like some of these guys are charging, which is ridiculous, I would say go check them out. It's good to see some upcoming or lesser-known MMA fighters, and you can probably see a lot of them on our partner, GoFightLive.tv. As for the WrestleMania card, let's answer that in a little bit, Samuel. I'll try and get back to that, but I want to get back to Will Vafides because after the Ring of Honor show in Manhattan that Midge, Chris, and I went to. You were across the street over at Madison Square Garden for the Raw house show. How'd that go? I heard Sonny was there.
Yeah, actually, Sonny showed up. That was a nice little surprise.
Back to her old fucking grounds. Stomping grounds.
Yeah, she looked great. A lot of fans really didn't know her, I think, because I think, again, and I was kind of surprised by this, a lot of kids in the crowd, not too many older crowd. You know, usually you think you would see that in the Garden. Yeah, a lot of people didn't really know her. I was very happy to see her. I had amazing seats, thanks to the girlfriend. She got me some amazing seats, pretty much from the 12th row from the front. So pretty good seats. The show was great. Triple H's first show in a long time, so that was really nice to see. He looked great in the ring, great match. There was some great wrestling that night. You know, the Divas match that was the only match I would say that was really not worth it, but otherwise, a very good show. And what's good about house shows with especially pro wrestling, especially like WWE, they'll do things at live shows that they won't be able to do on TV. For instance, what Orton was doing when John Cena was getting cheered, he was actually moving his hand jerking off to Cena. So he was doing things like that where the crowd's siding with Cena, but Randy Orton's clearly not happy about the crowd's decision, and he'll basically be vocal about it, or at least in a way of hand gestures or looking at the crowd. CM Punk was really good. The Miz was great on the microphone. Alex Riley was actually really great on the microphone. That line that he used on Raw, Miz is going to be his best man at his wedding, he used that very same line at the house show. But, overall, it was a good show. I always enjoy the live shows. It's just as fun. They do more things there that I think they don't go on Raw or SmackDown. So I would encourage anybody to go out there and definitely go to a live show if you get a chance.
Yeah, Will, you just mentioned seats, how you were 12 rows from the ring. Me and Eric were the second to last row in the Prudential Center.
And I paid less money. So it's funny how that is. It shows you that's why it's affordable. You can go to a WWE show for $20, and you can't go to an MMA show for $50, just like you said. And that's what they have to improve on is their pricing.
They're making tons of money on it, so I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Well, the whole point of it is you're not even guaranteed a real fight. A fight can end in 8 seconds. That's why, especially a main event. So
I want my fights to end in 8 seconds.
There you go. I'm just saying you want to get your money's worth, and you have to make sure you get your money's worth out of the event. And if you don't feel you got your money's worth, then it couldn't have been that good of a show for you.
Well, in my defense, Will Vafidez, the past two choices, I should say, for my fight of the year have both gone the distance. I can appreciate that as well. But let's go to one more call. I'm going to try and squeeze in. 646 area code, name and location.
This is Enzenwa from New York.
Yes, Enzenwa, hello.
That's right, it's the one and the same. How you doing?
Sorry, it was just real hard to hear you there.
No, it's fine. I was brushing my teeth. I was like, I'm probably not going to get a call because of the wonderful line is so long on the Wrestling Roundtable. The hottest podcast in all of podcasting, ladies and gentlemen.
Enzenwa, ladies and gentlemen, has also submitted guest columns for our website before, and you can do that as well if you send in any of your work to WrestlingRoundtable@gmail.com. And what's on your mind now, sir?
Number one, Ring of Honor show. Thought it was good. Seemed a little rushed, I guess, because it was at 4 o'clock, but, things happen. I was shocked by the Eddie Edwards thing. I popped for it. I was also kind of into the whole, it seemed like there's a bit of a double switch between the Briscoes and the All Night Express. But I guess, New York will tell the Briscoes if they have to because of what they've been doing for the past couple. I didn't go to the MSG show because the last time I went to the MSG show, it felt like I spent all this money for nothing. That was because of the pay-per-view right after it. It was a fatal four-way, and I was like, wait a second. I just saw this card yesterday. Why am I watching it again? But either way, it was during WrestleMania season, so I figured it would be a good show. And I missed the TNA talk, and yeah, 1 minute and 30 seconds, no, that's not how you run a company, no. And if he gets his job back or doesn't get that much of a punishment, then I honestly don't think that they really know what to do or what they are doing disciplinarily with this guy, Jeff Hardy. They really could have handled that a lot better than just on demand for 300 hours, blah, blah, blah. Also, Zuffa buying Strikeforce is like AT&T buying T-Mobile. What the heck's going on?
I don't know, but hopefully it leads to you getting a better connection because I can barely hear you, Enzenwa. Sorry, but we got to move on. But thanks for calling in, and I want to get back to Samuel from San Diego's question about WrestleMania because by the time we come back for our next show, that's what we'll be talking about. Will Vafidez, Will Brooks, looking forward to WrestleMania at all?
I am and I'm not. There's certain things I want to see and certain things I don't want to see. I don't want to see Snooki, ever. I do want to see The Rock. I do want to see Del Rio become champion. I do want to see The Miz and Cena. So, I mean, those things I want to see, those things I don't want to see. Yeah, I'm going to watch it. Of course I'm going to watch it, but am I looking forward to it? Probably not as much as in years past.
I am looking forward to seeing Snooki. Looking forward to Trish Stratus. Looking forward to Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler. I look forward to anything Vince McMahon wants to give me.
Spoken like a good sheep. Will Vafides.
Will Brooks doesn't understand business. Snooki is a decision to get media in, and I think it's a great idea. That match makes, I think, even WrestleMania better. I love the build between Cole and Jerry Lawler. One of the best builds I think we've had in Mania in years. That's great. The Rock
I do
coming
think
in
Michael Cole's kind of Pope chamber for commentary is pretty hilarious.
Oh, my God. It's like the JR. When JR had his own little area, but that got him over as a character. I think Michael Cole has done an amazing job as this character. I think this WrestleMania is built better than last year. It's definitely The Rock is going to help get the buys up there, and it'll be interesting to see what he does, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it more than I had been the last few years. So I think it's going to be a great Mania, and I think that as a wrestling fan, you should definitely watch it and also get the DVD that is the untold story of WrestleMania, because as soon as I get off here, I'm going to watch it. And
you haven't watched it yet?
I'm watching it now, and I stopped for the radio show. And so far, it's an amazing DVD.
How far did you get?
I got to WrestleMania 9, so I have a lot more to go.
Yeah,
but,
well, I'll tell you what. I watched it on Netflix. I want to connect it to Snooki because the DVD, I completely agree, is great. I recommend it. I want to get into more detail, probably on the next show, I think. But the opening was a little ridiculous before, the intro video before the titles. Now, I never cared for the Showcase of the Immortals tagline, whatever. But I think they've actually used this before in the past couple of years or so, but this really stuck out in my mind. Now it's not even enough that they call it the Showcase of the Immortals. Now it's the Celebration of Life. What? It's fucking WrestleMania. What Celebration of Life? Snooki and Celebration of Life have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. Just wanted to point that out.
Isn't that what they tell us at funerals?
I don't know. Okay, move on, please.
Yes. Corey,
yes.
Are you looking forward to WrestleMania? I guess not.
Well, no, she's got her main event. Sheamus is facing Daniel Bryan. That's what she wanted.
Actually, no, Michael Cole and Jerry the King Lawler is the main event.
According to Michael Cole. Not that I don't get why they got Snooki, it's just that anything that has to do with the Jersey Shore makes me want to vomit. That's why I don't care for it.
Well, then you're not really from Jersey.
Why? Because I don't like
No, I'm from New Jersey. I was born here, and it makes me fucking sick, too. That being said, it's funny how you bring up so often, Will Vafides, how WWE tops TNA in pretty much every category, where they get whatever latest fucking broad, Angelina or some shit, in TNA, and then WWE just tops it with Snooki and gets all the publicity for it. So in that sense, I guess it's kind of smart and it works, but it's still kind of sad in the sense that back then, 25, 26, whatever years ago, they used to actually get not just celebrities, but athletic celebrities who appear like they could actually have a wrestling match. Now they don't even bother with athletes or athletic celebrities. I think she barely even qualifies as a celebrity. But just making a sad statement on the level of pop culture that WWE is dealing with right now. Speaking of WrestleMania, Triple H Undertaker, I don't think it'll be a bad match, but I don't think anybody truly expects it to live up to the Michaels classics from the past couple of years. That being said, the promo that aired on Raw for Triple H Undertaker, that was about 4 minutes, and had everybody talking about it, I thought was excellent, really good. Everyone complaining about them not acknowledging the match from 10 years ago should not be surprised. Yeah, it's stupid, but you shouldn't be upset about it because it shouldn't be a surprise. When Rock fought Austin at WrestleMania 17, they didn't even acknowledge the WrestleMania match those two had from 2 years prior, let alone 10 years ago. So that being said, I thought the build-up was really good, and it's kind of cool in the sense that it's just based on two names wrestling each other. So I can't say I'm sold on it myself, and I don't think it should go last, but I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world. So any more thoughts on Triple H Undertaker, Will?
I don't think they're going to move this one last. I don't think it has that feel like Shawn Michaels, and it kind of kills the Michaels Undertaker match too, because it's like You know,
well, it's making Undertaker, and you'll see this in the DVD later on too. Undertaker's streak is like more important than a belt now. It's what people want.
Yeah.
They want the shot at that.
Which is good because, like I said, you don't need titles to make a storyline work sometimes, and this is that scenario where you don't need a title to build a match like that. So I
Which
think
is fine.
that, yeah, it's absolutely fine, and I don't mind this. I don't mind the build at all. They haven't touched each other. They have barely spoken next to each other, and there's more effect to that than a lot of other matches that are scheduled. So in my eyes, this is a classic way of getting a feud over just by having two men just talk about their match rather than interacting or fighting or hitting each other. This is a classic way of getting the build-up right, and the video package was very, very well sold. I don't think it's going to be the main event. I think The Rock needs to be the last part of the show, and whatever he's going to be involved with, I think The Rock should open it, I think The Rock should close it. And whatever happens in the end, Cena and Miz should be established as the last match. The Miz is going to win the match, and I think there's going to be a confrontation between The Rock and Cena.
In some form, I hope, and I keep mentioning that WrestleMania True Story documentary. We don't have the time. We'll go into detail about it in a couple weeks when we come back. I highly recommend it. It was a really good documentary, but we'll go into detail more, like I said. But Midge, really quickly, we've only got like a minute left. You went to the World One indie show in Jackson, New Jersey recently. I think that's promoted by Steve Carino.
Yeah, it is.
How was the World One show?
It was pretty fun. It's a little tiny show. It's not even an arena or an armory. It's in a Sweet 16 room in the Knights of Columbus building. But the fans that are there, they want to be there. They're cheering for their guys. It's a little show. It's a combination of a lot of Respect guys make up the show. ROH guys were there, Delirious, Adam Cole. A lot of upcoming guys that nobody really knows, and they're just trying to make names for themselves, get experience. It's a fun little deal. There's actually one guy there I never saw before. He was kind of goofy. His name is Sean Hayes. I could see him and Orange Cassidy in Respect putting on some pretty entertaining stuff for the fans. So if you ever get a chance to see that guy, he was kind of a humorous addition to the show.
Glad to see that everyone seems to have fun on the live shows they've gone to, pro wrestling or MMA, but this show is just about done. We'll be back in a couple weeks talking about WrestleMania 27 and talking about WrestleMania, the True Story documentary. So for the panel of Brett Midge Simonello, Chris Harris, Will Vafides, Will Brooks, Coriander Ake, I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Sorry we didn't get to all your calls, but you can always sign up for the message board and newsletter and keep interacting with the Wrestling Roundtable. Go to WrestlingRoundtable.com and join us next time on Wrestling Roundtable Radio.